You're very welcome to the seventh episode in CMC's online salon series. This week we feature viola player and composer Sebastian Adams with specially recorded works by Amanda Feery, Tom Lane and Sebastian himself. Before we begin, we were very sad to learn this week of composer Eric Sweeney's death. Eric was a composer whose contribution to music in Ireland was substantial as a composer, conductor and teacher. We extend our heartfelt sympathies to his family during this difficult time. We plan to mark his passing and celebrate his contribution to composition in Ireland on our website in the coming weeks. And so, back to today's salon, and we're delighted to be joined today by composer and viola player Sebastian Adams and composer Tom Lane. How are you? Good evening to you both. Sebastian, tell me why you've chosen these pieces today.
This is actually the first online concert I've ever done, and so probably the starting point for the programming was just thinking about the medium and the fact that people won't be listening to this in a concert hall or wherever the concert happens to be programmed, but basically in any kind of atmosphere which we have no control over. So it could be a fantastic space, but more likely it will be, not a fantastic space. And then I guess one of the major things that I considered was just length. So I went for 3 pieces, just so it's quite a short program, but also I paid careful attention to trying to make a trajectory through the whole program. So the 3 pieces, I feel it's almost like A to C, through 3 pieces. And then probably the next thing was that I'd wanted to play Amanda's piece for quite a while, and I've been sort of on the lookout for an opportunity to fit it in. So I built it around playing her piece basically, and then Underground Gothic, Tom's viola and electronics piece, I hadn't played that in quite a long time, maybe like 4 years. So I just thought that would go well with Amanda's piece and be nice to come back to as well, which it was. So that's it, really.
So first up is Amanda Feery's piece, Kissing the Ground, and that's from 2015. We'll talk about the piece after we hear your performance, but before we see and hear it, you might tell me about making the video. Where did you record it?
Yeah, basically, the first thing I thought about doing a Zoom concert was how the fact that the atmosphere could be just totally lacking would have a huge impact on the performance. And some of you are probably familiar with a lot of my work is involved in running the group Kirkos, and we are hugely into basically making more kind of special concert experiences. So we don't just program music and perform it, but we also think a lot about the environment and just overall the way we're presenting it. So doing concerts online is a very specific challenge, I think, and that's one of the fascinating things about the coronavirus. Maybe one of the few positives is for artists are being forced to explore creative ways to use this medium, which at first glance is simply a worse way of presenting art. But on second glance, there are actually things that you can do which are totally impractical in a concert environment. So essentially like the distinction between theatre and cinema, where you can take as much time as you want between takes, between pieces, and so you can do different pieces on different days and in different places. So for Amanda's piece, partly because of the title Kissing the Ground, and partly because I found a particularly beautiful place coming up to when I was planning to record it. I found this amazing place along the Dodder in Milltown, where there's just a sort of seemingly endless expanse of green, of brambles and nettles and stuff like that. And it's really quite secluded, considering it's sort of very near the city centre and suburban and really beautiful there. So I just sort of traipsed in, sort of stepped over loads of nettles to get to exactly where I wanted to, and that's what we did.
Well, let's hear and see Amanda Feery's Kissing the Ground, performed by yourself, Sebastian Adams, now. Amanda Feery's Kissing the Ground, specially performed and filmed by our guest for this salon, Sebastian Adams. Sebastian, how did you find playing this piece, and specifically, as you were mentioning earlier about using the having to do give a performance on Zoom, using the outdoor space as an advantage in terms of being able to do things that you wouldn't normally do in a concert hall. How did you find that whole experience, and did it bring a different character to that piece, Amanda's piece itself? Because I presume this piece, like many, was intended for an indoor concert space.
The piece, well, actually, I don't know. I don't know how it was premiered, but I presume it was done in an indoor concert space. It was originally written for Zoe Conway, so it started off as a violin piece, and I think I heard it on Amanda's SoundCloud when I was looking for viola pieces. I think I was hoping she had a viola piece and she didn't, or something like that. And we got talking about it, and she said she would redo it for me at some point. And I just thought she was going to transcribe it, which, as Tom probably also knows, because he's a viola player, you just take a violin piece and Sibelius and put it a fifth down and you've written a new piece. So I thought that's what she'd do. But she actually quite drastically redid it, which was really nice. And I'm not sure how much of that was just because she wasn't totally happy with it, because as a composer, often once the dust settles on a piece after the first performance, you think, oh no, that was all wrong or something. I'm not sure if it was a mixture of that and that she just thought it needed to be different for viola, but she really changed it quite a lot, and it was really fun to work on. And I love that kind of obsessive music. It's very insistent. I think it's really pushing at the point of the kind of jiggy rhythm the whole time. And yeah, so doing it outside definitely had an impact on the energy in a way that I can't really put my finger on, but it was odd because getting to that particular location was not that easy, and I ended up like my arms are actually covered in little cuts from brambles and stuff like that. And I was using a Bluetooth pedal, and the first problem I encountered when I started playing was that I couldn't get the Bluetooth pedal to stay flat, so I kept turning the pages wrong. And I was in such a small area that I was very confined physically. I didn't have much space to move around the way I would normally move quite a lot. And somehow none of that mattered. And as soon as I started playing, I was really very comfortable, because it just did seem right somehow. And it was quite a nice feeling to be outside in a city, and just we had nobody in view, and I didn't feel like I was annoying anybody except whatever dog you hear at the end maybe. And so it was quite a free energy, I think, playing there.
Yeah, it's I think everybody would agree. It comes across really, really well, and it's interesting. It's an interesting ambience. To hear the sound of some of the wind sound, and then, as you say, the cameo appearance by the dog towards the end of the recording, and some bird song as well, and I think a wood pigeon. So it's nice how those sounds are able to coexist with the sounds of Amanda's piece.
Yeah, I think they do blend in with it really well. They definitely add a new atmosphere that is just different to what you would get in the concert hall. And Amanda was totally up for it, and so yeah, it was nice.
Tom, if I can turn to you and your piece, Underground Gothic. As we'll see from the video shortly, there's a strong theatrical element to the work, and the original piece was not intended for performance in a concert hall. Is this a common approach to many of your works?
I guess it is. It is a bit of a theme in some of my things. The original piece, it was called Underground Gothic. It was in 2014. and it took place on a train, and the train was going from Conley to Houston, and that's through the tunnel under Phoenix Park. So that's the title, Underground Gothic, because the train came to a stop in the tunnel, and this kind of scene unfolded. And it's part of the Bram Stoker Festival, so there was this kind of spooky, unsettling theme to the piece. Yeah, it was kind of a theatrical, immersive experience. And the first 8 minutes of the piece, of that original piece, is what this viola piece is based on. And that was originally heard by the audience on headphones, and there were silent disco headphones. So all of the audience members in the two carriages, were listening to that soundtrack. And then what they could see in the train was these physical performers who started off as a passenger in the train and then started sort of panic and trying to escape. And then in the tunnel, they were taken away by these figures in hazmat suits with masks. And so at the time, there was an Ebola epidemic going on. So that was kind of weirdly reminiscent of that. And of course, there's a whole other pandemic going on right now. So it's incredible how the piece kind of comes back to have these resonances.
Let's hear Tom Lane's your piece, Underground Gothic, performed on the Dart by Sebastian Adams now. basically told me that she done this exact thing before she changed religion. Almost exactly. Almost exactly. Even the details, the backstory, how much time she was like away for.
But how long was she not?
He said 2 months, and we're like, what, a week and a half ago? So.
What happens if the lights go out? There's no real way of knowing the show to get scared. Just take good devastation. Anxiety. It's an unnecessary emotion based on just take your medicine. Please remain seated. What's she looking for? What happens if the lights go out?
Sebastian Adams performing Tom Lane's Underground Gothic. Sebastian, I have to ask you, after seeing this, did you have any passengers come up to you and ask questions while you were recording Tom's piece?
No. Yeah, I think I don't think the passengers were too keen on it, to be perfectly honest. There was, it wasn't a busy train, and I mean, I was engrossed in the performance, so I wasn't looking around that much. But there was one unfortunate woman sitting kind of near us, who just moved eventually. And then obviously there's a person who interrupted us in the middle by passing through the carriage. So I think he must have got a real shock and just gone, oh my God, and like got out of frame as quickly as possible. So no, people did not ask questions. But I guess people are probably much more cautious about approaching strangers than they normally would be in a public place. So I would have been pretty surprised, really. And in fact, I was worried coming up to doing the piece. There's a Lewis passing. I was worried coming up to doing it that it was potentially going to make passengers uncomfortable. So I was really hoping for a quiet carriage, and luckily we more or less got one, and we only did a couple of takes. So we were trying not to be too much of a pest.
It has the kind of a feel of a guerrilla performance, if I can describe it as that. You're sort of performing it, and you're hoping you're not going to be a member of Irish Rail isn't going to come around and stop you playing or point to some
exactly.
regulations. So fair play to you for managing it. Tom, how did you find this version of the piece by Sebastian? Because, as you were describing earlier, in terms of the genesis and the background to this piece, it's presumably quite different from the original version in terms of both how it's recorded and also how it's experienced by the audience.
Yeah, well, so the very, very original version of the piece was this site-specific immersive performance, and then it became a solo viola piece, and that was partly because Sebastian was organizing a program of pieces which were based on trains, because they were performing Steve Reich's different trains. So it became more of a concert piece, but then it was performed in a very kind of specific concert setting, but it definitely wasn't in a train, but it was kind of taking the sounds of trains into a concert space. And then now it's great. There's this opportunity to make it something else again, which is kind of bringing it back round so that it's like site-specific origins, in that Sebastian has taken it back into the place where it was originally conceived of in the train. And all the sounds you hear in the recorded track are actually from trains. So it's kind of it's like doubling up the sound of the train, because you also hear the sound of the dart that Sebastian's in. And then there's other things, like you can see Sebastian is being moved around by the train, and that's, I mean, he does it very well, but of course that's influencing the sound, how he's playing it, and the performance. So that's an amazing aspect to the performance that you would just never get in a concert setting, that the space is actually moving and moving the performer and changing the sound. So it's all these different aspects, and then of course, as you say, like kind of guerrilla aspect to it, that you're taking this contemporary music out into public spaces and just kind of confronting people with it. I think that's quite exciting. It's very inspirational. Yeah.
Just coming back to this format of online performances and what you were mentioning earlier, Sebastian, in your introduction to the salon, and how you approached the pieces and the using different locations. Is this something that you think you will kind of continue? Your kind of your exploration of in the absence of being able to give performances in physical spaces. I mean, is there more to explore there, or is this just it?
I think there's more to explore. Yeah. Initially, when people started doing Zoom performances and other kinds of online performances, I sort of was a bit reluctant to do them myself, because partly I wanted a break. I'd been quite busy coming up to the start of the pandemic, actually, and had been about to have a break anyway. So unlike most people, when everyone's work collapsed. I mean, it's been terrible for most musicians. I already had nothing coming up, and I was sort of happy about that. So initially, I didn't want to get involved in that too early, and then I saw everybody doing it, and I'm kind of a contrarian maybe, and if everybody's doing something, I don't want to do it so much. So at first, I was like, maybe, I don't know. But I was just talking to Tom about this the other day, actually, and how it opens up a lot of new possibilities, and I think we have to be aware of the fact that there are other global reasons why the way we approach music and music performance might have to change radically and permanently in the future, which are the fact that we're in the midst of a climate crisis, and no matter what you do in your normal day-to-day life, if you're flying on planes all the time for your work, you're having a huge impact on the environment. And while that's still socially acceptable now, it could be in a decade that we no longer think that. And so what's quite interesting about this is it's like, I mean, this isn't really relevant to what I'm doing today because, I could have done this without having a big carbon footprint as a live concert because I'm in Dublin. But, for collaborations with people who live in different countries, this could become the main way that we can do concerts in the future. And so it's, I think, interesting that people are being forced to explore that now for a different reason, because it could become a kind of permanent thing later on.
Tom, do you have any thoughts on that from a point of view as you as a composer and your work in various kind of theatrical collaborations?
Yeah, I mean, it's really relevant what Sebastian says. I mean, lots of things, I guess, in some senses, composing scores is quite an efficient thing because you spend a lot of time, just one person, just working on something in one place, and you don't need to spend a lot of time traveling, and you can easily talk on the phone or on video calls if you're collaborating on an opera, that kind of thing. And then and so you a lot of the time is spent actually not traveling, and it's just in one place. So that's already a good thing. But the other side of my work is more based in theatres and kind of composition for theatre and sound design. And every theatre space is so different to every other theatre space, and there are so many possibilities with different speakers and spatializing the sound. And that means that every time you take one theatrical piece and put it in another space, you just have to be there to be able to hear exactly how things sound and to recalibrate the sound and remix it and make changes that might happen during the rehearsal process. So currently there's no technological way of getting around that, but that there might be in the future. There might be ways of getting very good reproduction of spatialized sound in a space through headphones. Could happen, but currently, like just before this all happened, I was working on a piece in New York, which we started in the Gate Theatre in Dublin, and it transferred to New York, and I had to go there to set up the sound because there was no one else who would have been able to do it and understood it in the same way. But maybe in the future there'll be a way of doing that remotely, and maybe the actors will be remote too. But we'll see. We'll see about that.
So we come to the last piece in the Salon, Sebastian, and it's one of your own ones, Breath Play. And unlike the two works that we've just heard, this work doesn't have a score and is a text piece with just a title. This is something that you have explored in a number of your pieces over the recent years. How different is this approach, both from a compositional and a performance perspective, to composing something that's notated?
I guess in the details it's totally different, but on the kind of deeper conceptual level, it's really not that different at all. Quite a lot of my pieces spring from a simple idea that you could explain very quickly. And I suppose something I've been doing a lot more consciously in the last few years in my own music is actually finding ways to write what what I mean in text or in other ways rather than in musical notation, because I noticed that sometimes when my music was very difficult to perform, it was partly only difficult because the only way to notate my ideas in musical notation as something specific made it very difficult to play and very difficult to learn, maybe more than play. And whereas, actually you could pretty much get the same effect by following a 2-line instruction of text. So that's one aspect, although maybe not the most important aspect. Probably the main difference, maybe conceptually, is that when you have a piece where in a lot of my text pieces, the only instruction is the title. So in this case, that is true. Breath play is the whole piece, basically. And what it means is the idea is much more, what's the word? It's much more direct and concise. And there's a lot of gray area.
So I read from the notes on the program that you've sent us beforehand that this piece there's a connection to Stravinsky's is it Elegy for viola, or or it's based on it in some way. Maybe tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, that's a good way of illustrating the way I think about text pieces and concept pieces sometimes in my own work anyway, which is that although, so what I'll be doing basically when we cut to my video is that I will be playing the Stravinsky solo viola piece, Elegy, with a difference. But that is not the point of the piece. And in fact, when I played the piece the last time, which was also a little Instagram recording, I played a Bach piece instead. So essentially the piece is, my way of playing this piece so far is it's like a piece which is a vessel for playing another piece. And so my kind of piece is almost like an intervention on Stravinsky in this case. And it was an intervention on a Bach saraband before. So everything I play is not my material, and it's like the surrounding experience, which you will see is actually my piece, which I've become quite interested in different ways of looking at ownership and copyright, and so that's part of why I'm doing this sort of work, which is really playing somebody else's music, but in a way that probably the composer wouldn't recognize as their piece. And I think that's an interesting thing to think about, because we can be very obsessed with ownership in all music, really, but maybe particularly in classical music. And I guess one other thing about this performance is this is a concept which I think the idea of this piece probably would be very, I guess, a comic thing in normal circumstances. And I don't think anybody will find it funny now. And I just think that's an interesting thing about context and music, which is that I think the external world has such an impact on musical performance. And, if you played this video in 2019, I think probably people would have thought it was mildly amusing, maybe. And I think it takes on a very different aspect in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic.
Well, let's hear this piece now, Breath Play by Sebastian Adams. Sebastian Adams' Breath Play, performed by the composer in this episode of CMC Salon. My thanks to Sebastian for these wonderfully engaging and evocative performances, and to Tom Lane for joining us today. Next week is the final episode in the series. We feature soprano Elizabeth Hilliard in a programme of work specially recorded in CMC's library. Do join us for this same time next Thursday at 6 p.m. Until then, bye for now.